Hi, my name's Trevor, and this is My Mind's Eye. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at Jordan Peterson. The video is called You'll Be Hurt, but You Have to Do It. Jordan Peterson, this will set you free. All right, so let's get set free. Let's see what Jordan's talking about.
Nietzsche said that you could tell much about a man's character by how much truth he could tolerate, which is very interesting. You know,
All right, so real quick, because I do want to let Jordan continue with his thought, but I absolutely agree with that. You can tell a lot about a man's character, or just a person in general's character, by how much truth he can tolerate. In fact, there was a gentleman named Selwyn Duke who said, "A society that no longer values truth will eventually hate those that speak it." And I think that's actually where we currently find ourselves in society today, is hating those that speak it. But more importantly, truth to me is the foundation of reality. Truth is fact, it's factual, and that is reality, in my opinion. But more than my opinion, that's actually what truth is. It's fact, and facts are reality. So that's why when you tell the truth, or you're truthful, it's effortless. It's easy. Because you don't have to, like you do when you lie, or people lies, you have to keep all these lies in order, or keep promoting lies to try to keep your story straight. And usually people that do that tend to trip up and expose their lies. So to me, the truth is paramount. And I do agree with Jordan here that it will reveal a person's character and how they can be truthful, or if they're truthful or not.
by how much truth he could tolerate, which is very interesting. You know, there's an idea in the great Western tradition that the truth is the way and the path of life, and that no one comes to the Father except through the truth.
Okay, that's scriptural.
I believe that to be the case, because I don't think that you can manifest who you are without the truth. And so I think it's literally and metaphorically truth, that the pathway to who you could be if you were completely who you were is through the truth. And so the truth does set you free, but the problem is that it destroys everything that isn't worthy in you as it sets you free, and that's a process of burning.
The truth will set you free, and that's a process of burning. I do agree with that, in that the truth will set you free, and it is a process of burning. Because if you do any type of introspective work, you look within, and you are able to shelve your ego and just look at the facts, the data of who you are, or how you lived your life. And, if you do that and you can be truthful and honest, you will burn away those things about you that are no good. And it can be very painful. But if you can do it, it's extremely liberating. Because to operate in the world in truth is easy. Just like telling the truth is easy. And I don't agree with a lot of these people that say my truth. I don't think that's a thing. I think there is the truth, and then your subjective opinion on what the truth is. And that's how you can get witnesses to corroborate an event, because they both saw the truth of what happened, and then they're explaining what happened truthfully about that incident. So I'm sure I'll have more to say here, but let's keep it rolling. And it's painful because you cling to what you shouldn't be. And I think a lot of people do that, actually cling to what you shouldn't be, because any type of growing or learning or failures in your life, it's painful. And some people don't want to go through that pain, so they cling to what they shouldn't be. But let's continue.
And it's painful because you cling to what you shouldn't be, partly out of pride and partly out of ignorance and partly out of laziness. And so then you encounter something true. And you all know this. You all know this perfectly well, because when was the last time that you learned something important that wasn't a blow of some sort,
Right.
And it's often you look back at your life and you think, oh, God, I really learned something there. I wouldn't want to do that again, but it really changed my life. I mean, sometimes it can really destroy you, an encounter with the truth, and you never really recover. But now and then something comes along and straightens you out, and a lot of you has to go. A lot of you has to burn away.
And so I absolutely agree with that. My biggest gains as a human being, my biggest growth has come from monumental failures as a person, from things that I did that were catastrophic to me. And sometimes I'm somebody who suffered from depression throughout my whole life, in different places of my life. And some of the times that depression is a byproduct of things that I did that I regret, that I wasn't proud of. And being able to look within myself, do that introspective work to see the truth of how I was or who I was or what I did, and change myself and burn that part of me away. And in the process, I've come out significantly better as a human being for it, but it definitely was painful, but I am the better person for it.
And I suppose in some sense the idea is that everything about you that isn't worthy is to be put into the flames. I learned when I was a kid, about 25 or so, a little older than a kid, that almost everything that I said was one form of lie or another. And I wasn't any worse, I would say, than the people that I was associating with, or any better. And the lies were manifold. They were attempts to win arguments for the sake of winning the argument. That might be one. Attempts to indicate my intellectual prowess when there were competitions of that sort. Maybe just the sheer pleasure of engaging in an intellectual argument and winning. My inability to distinguish between ideas that I had read and incorporated because I had read, but hadn't realized that I hadn't yet earned the right to use. All of that. And, I had this experience that lasted a long time. Well, I would say it's really never gone away. And I think this was the awakening of my conscience. And I didn't realize this until much later when I was reading Socrates' Apology. This voice, for lack of a better word, made itself manifest inside me. And it said every time I said something that wasn't true. And that's usually what it said. That's not true. You don't believe that.
And I think that's absolutely correct. That inner voice, that person behind the eyes, the real you, your consciousness, when you tell a lie, it will let you know when you're lying and being dishonest. And if you have any love of the truth, that is tough to contend with. And I believe if you are on the path of truth and to be truthful, that inner voice that lets you know when you're not being honest and truthful will be one of the best companions in that pursuit of truth that you could possibly have. And I really do. I love what Jordan's saying here. It's very accurate.
Or there was a sensation that was associated with it. I don't think this is that uncommon. I
All right.
asked my psychology classes for many years in a row if they had an experience, that they had a voice in their head, let's say, it's a metaphor, or a feeling that communicated to them when they were about to do something wrong.
Now, he's saying this is a metaphor. No, I'm not experiencing any interruptions. All right. He's saying that it's a metaphor, but it's also not a metaphor. It's literal because all of us have inner monologue. Most people have a voice where they talk to themselves. And some people don't have the voice. As I recently found out, that monologue that they have reveals itself in pictures and in words, but they don't actually have a voice where they talk to themselves. Where, for me personally, I can talk to myself, I can have conversations, but I also can have that monologue in picture and words. And it absolutely lets you know when you're about to do something wrong. And I think that's, like I said, one of the best companions in the pursuit of truth that you can have.
And it was universally the case that people agreed with one of those statements or another. And the other thing I would ask is, well, do you always listen to it? And of course, the answer to that was definitely no. I learned that so much of what I was doing was false. And I think I learned this. There was a reason that this came to me so clearly. I was trying to understand why people did terrible things. And I was really concentrating on the terrible, terrible things that people do. And I was interested in Auschwitz, for
That's
example.
pretty terrible.
And not as a political phenomenon, but as a psychological phenomenon. I was curious about how you could be an Auschwitz guard. Many people did many terrible things during the 20th century. And the idea that I was somehow better than them, or that I should assume a priori that I was better than them, and that I wouldn't have made the same choices or worse had I been in the same situation, was a very, very, very dangerous supposition. And in fact, a sufficiently dangerous supposition to bring about the very danger that I assumed was worth avoiding. I had this idea, that what had happened, especially in Nazi Germany, but also in the Soviet Union, shouldn't happen again. That what we needed to do, because of what happened in the 20th century, especially because we also managed to create hydrogen bombs, that we had become so technologically powerful that there wasn't time for that anymore. That time for that was over, and that we really needed to understand why it happened, and that perhaps we could go deep enough in that understanding so that you could stop it. Because if you understand the problem, maybe you can solve it. And at least in part, I came to believe that the problem was, as Solzhenitsyn said, that the problem is that the line between good and evil runs down every human heart. And I was reading Jung at the same time, and he believed that the human soul was a tree whose roots grew all the way to hell. And believed also that in the full investigation of the shadow, which was the dark side of the human psyche, was that it was bottomless, essentially, that it was like an experience of hell. And that also struck me as true. The way to stop those sorts of things from happening was to stop yourself from being the sort of person who would do it, who would even start to do it. For me, it was a matter of understanding that if we want this sort of thing to not happen anymore, then we have to start to become the sort of people who wouldn't do it, which seems rather self-evident,
Right,
all things
exactly.
considered, unless, you believe that we're the pawns of social forces, for example, like the Marxists do. And I don't believe that, because we're also the creator of social forces. And we're also capable of standing up to social forces,
Right.
because I would say the individual is more powerful than the social force, all things considered, interestingly enough, that the way to stop such things from happening, the way to remember properly, is to understand that you could do it, that you could do those terrible things, because the people who did them were like you. And that the way out of that is to stop being like that. And the way you stop being like that is, well, at least in part, by ceasing to tell yourself lies that you don't believe in, and that you shouldn't act out.
Right.
And and that's made a huge difference in my life, for better or for worse. I mean, it was a very uncanny experience, I would say, because it's very discombobulating to experience yourself as fragmented enough so that much of what you do and say is actually false. It's a lot of work to clean that up.
Yes.
A lot. The consequences are, in principle, worthwhile. Understanding that was part of what drove me towards clinical psychology, say, and away from political science and law and from politics in general, because I started to believe that, and I think this is the great Western idea, which people were quite irritated about, by the way, on Q&A last night as well, that the proper route forward for the redemption of the individual and for mankind as a whole is as a consequence of the redemption of each individual. And I truly believe that. And I believe that that occurs as a consequence of adherence to the truth and courage in the face of being. That's rule one, right? To stand up straight with your shoulders back, is to take on the onslaught and to enter the contentious ring, and to do more than your best, because your best isn't enough, because your best isn't as good as you could be. You have to push yourself past that. And that's, as far as I can tell, where you find what you need in life. You find the meaning that sustains you in life, and you find the patterns of action that redeem the world, both at the same time.
Yeah, you always have to be striving for better, to be better. I think if you get complacent thinking you've achieved the best, you're only lying and fooling yourself, but you cease continuing to grow as an individual. So I do agree with Jordan in that we should always be striving for better.
I mean, life is a very difficult business. It's fatal, and it's full of suffering, and it's full of betrayal and malevolence. There's nothing about it that's trivial. It's all profound. And in order to find your way through all of that capacity for hellish experience, let's say, you need to develop a relationship with something that's profound. And you have that capacity. And what could be more profound than the truth? And what would you rather have on your side? And you might say, well, that's obvious, and of course everyone should do that. And then you need to know why you don't. And the answer is, well, the burns are still healing. It's like, well, there's no shortage of dead wood to burn off.
Right.
And there's no shortage of pain when the dead wood burns off. And that's what makes people afraid of the truth. Maybe that's why Moses encountered God in a burning bush. Who the hell knows? But there's something about that idea that seems to me to be the case. And so,
Well, I don't think God revealing himself to Moses in a burning bush has any correlation to burning away the lies or the untruth of yourself. But I applaud Jordan for trying to make the comparison. I just don't agree with that at all. That's not true.
what's the decision that you make? You decide to believe. It's a risk, an existential risk. It's an act of faith. You believe that the truth can set you free. You believe that people have an intrinsic divinity about their soul.
Right.
You decide that you're going to live in that manner and that you're going to let everything about yourself that isn't worthy of that goal die.
And so the intrinsic divinity of the soul that Jordan is talking about, I think also for me ties in with the fundamental truth that the sovereignty of the individual is one of the foundational characteristics of being a human being. The consciousness that I have, that all human beings have, each person is unique, like a snowflake. If you want to use an analogy, even with twins or triplets or people like that look like each other, even amongst twins or triplets, their personalities are completely different. They're their own sovereign human being. And so I do overall like what Jordan is saying here. He seems very well thought out, has so much value. But I really am enjoying his kind of analysis of truth and how to go about it.
And that might be almost everything that you are. And that's a terrible thing to contemplate. The only thing that's worse, I would say, is the alternative. Because the alternative is the sorts of hells that we managed to produce around us and that we produced with particular expertise
And we
during
do
the
that.
totalitarian regimes of the 20th century.
We also do that by
And
being
it would
untruthful.
be a good thing if we decided collectively and individually not to go back there again.
So, really good video from Jordan Peterson. I absolutely agree. The truth will set you free. It should be the path forward for everybody. I know it's incredibly difficult as a human being. It sounds easy in theory or in principle to do, but it's actually very tough because you find out a lot of ugly stuff about yourself if you really spend the time to break yourself down and burn away the things like Jordan is talking about. Fortunately for me, because I was going through a lot of depression and I was miserable and I didn't think I'd actually be on this earth much longer when I was in my late teens. But right around 19, I had my first true psychedelic experience. I mean, I had smoked some weed, marijuana before, which is the most mild, low form psychedelic that you can take. But I had my first LSD experience, and talk about having your compass, your perception of the world completely realigned. it did that for me. And it gave me a perspective that I didn't possess before. And one thing my sociology professor said to me my first year in college was, when you were analyzing these cultures, these groups of people, and trying to understand why they did the things that they did, whether you existed or not, doesn't matter. It has zero impact on why these people did what they did. What you need to do is just be a set of eyes, a floating set of eyes, and that's it. It's like the rest of you doesn't exist. And what these eyes are doing is just analyzing the data, taking in all the information. And in doing so, it can allow you to be objective in a way that's necessary to understand all the information, so you can understand the motivations, the reasonings for why these people, groups of people, did what they did. And I mean, I understood the concept when my professor was telling me. I mean, I get what he was saying, but I truly didn't understand what he was saying. And it really didn't fully click with me until I had my first psychedelic experience on LSD, where I experienced ego death. And it was from that moment that, when that thing that my professor said to me, that it clicked. And I spent 2 years with myself, breaking myself down, analyzing myself, with that newfound perspective of learning how to just be a set of eyes in myself. And it's been a pursuit of mine over the last 20 years. And it's one of the most valuable, I think, lessons and tools I could have ever gotten and received, to be able to do that and burn that dead wood away, as Jordan was saying. So I'm sure I'll have a lot more to say in other videos. I'll have to check out some more Jordan Peterson, but I want to thank everybody for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Hope everybody has a blessed day, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.